Hello history buffs and welcome back to the channel. I'm Hannah, and with the release of season 2 of Wolf Hall, I'm going to be going back through season 1 and then season 2 and telling you all of the Easter eggs and references I found in each episode. Hi everyone, I'm so excited to finally share something that I've been working on for months. My book. I have poured so much love into this project, working closely with my amazing illustrator to make it as vibrant and engaging as possible. It's full of fun rhymes and colourful pages that bring history to life. Because, let's face it, King Henry VIII and his 6 wives had some seriously dramatic stories. You'll meet 3 Catherines, 2 Annes and 1 Jane, and you'll finally nail that classic rhyme: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Whether you're a kid or a history buff just like me, or just someone who loves a good story, I think you'll love this book. It's been such a joy to create, and I can't wait for you to read it yourself. You can grab your copy now on Amazon, just click the link below, and if you do, let me know in the comments section below. I'd love to know what you think. Thanks for all your support, and happy reading! Anne and Cromwell, now allies, walk down to meet the king and More. Anne and Henry leave, to which Cromwell asks More what he's going to do next. More responds with write and pray. Cromwell advises More to write little and pray lots, to which More asks if that was a threat. A callback to earlier on in the episode when More, who was confident he had the upper hand, threatened Cromwell. Henry, who seems to be drunk, mentions that he is off to Calais to meet the King of France, which they do in the October. Anne is Marquess of Pembroke at this point, something that the show doesn't highlight, although it does make me wonder if we had a series for each book and not 2 books in one series, they might have. It was on this trip to France that Anne met King Francis and the 2 danced together in Calais. Henry and Cromwell then have a tender moment in front of a tapestry that has featured frequently in the series so far, and when we have seen it, it has been Cromwell gazing at it. This tapestry features King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. In the biblical account of the reign of King Solomon, the Queen of Sheba visited his court, bringing gifts of gold, jewels and spices. Supposedly, her visit was to test King Solomon's wisdom by asking him to solve a number of riddles. In the show and the books, Cromwell is looking at this tapestry because it reminds him of an old flame.
What was her name? Anselma.
Or, as Mantel writes, the Queen of Sheba, smiling, light-footed, reminds him of the young widow he lodged with when he lived in Antwerp. Since they had shared a bed, should he have married her? In honour, yes. But if he had married Anselma, he couldn't have married Liz, and his children would be different. Children from the ones he has now. But when you think about the relevance to the characters, King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba are a reflection of Henry and Cromwell. Henry is the Queen of Sheba, gifting Thomas Cromwell, who is King Solomon, everything he could ever want to test him and to solve riddles, which, as Henry's Mr. Fix-It, was what Cromwell would do for the rest of his life and career. Henry also confides in Cromwell that he is desperate to sleep with Anne Boleyn and that he has tried to sleep with other women to take the edge off, but he was unable to do so, which in his mind is confirmation from God that his union to Anne is proof of the rightness of his pursuit. Henry also says that he will give Cromwell the post of Keeper of the Jewel House. This shows us how influential Anne is at this moment in time, and how she bends the king's ear, as she had said to Cromwell at the window that she would make him Keeper of the Jewel House.
I thought perhaps Keeper of the Jewel House.
I want you to be my new Keeper of the Jewel House.
Henry then says, everything you are, everything that you have, shall come from me. Which at face value isn't that bad, but when you think about Cromwell's fate, this is actually quite chilling. Up until now, Cromwell has been a self-made man, but now Henry is taking over and is basically warning Cromwell that his fate now lies in Henry's hands. In the next scene, Henry and Anne are parading through Canterbury Cathedral when they are stopped by Elizabeth Barton, the Nun of Kent, who was first mentioned earlier in the episode by Cromwell's sister-in-law, Joan. Elizabeth Barton tells her prophecy to Henry, who makes a joke about it, and then she says that she sees Henry's mother surrounded in flames, to which Henry gets a bit tetchy. Henry's mother is, of course, Queen Elizabeth of York, who died in 1503 trying to give birth to another heir after the death of Henry's elder brother, Prince Arthur. Henry was only 11 when his mother died. We know that Henry was close to his mother, as they had similar handwriting, suggesting that Elizabeth taught Henry how to write. We have a manuscript that depicts a young Henry weeping by his mother's empty bed, and 4 years after his mother's passing, Henry wrote a letter expressing that no news has been as hateful to him since his mother's passing, indicating that the loss continued to affect him deeply even years later. We also know that despite the fact that he is persecuting Catholics if they don't agree to the oath of supremacy, Henry is a Catholic at heart. So the fact that Barton has told him that his mother is surrounded by flames, inferring that she is burning in hell, is very triggering for Henry. No child wants to be told that their parents are in hell. Cromwell then chases after Elizabeth Barton, and the stairs they are standing on are at Wells Cathedral in Somerset. These steps have also been used in other period dramas, such as Becoming Elizabeth. We then have a time skip. It's 1532 and they are in Calais, and a very jealous Henry is keeping a painful eye on Anne Boleyn as she flirts with King Francois of France, which is a very risky move, but also very clever on Anne's behalf, as the French court was very flirty, but it was about chivalric flirtation, unlike the English court. So she is actually demonstrating her diplomacy skills and political prowess for good relations with France. Unfortunately, the English, including Henry, would not see it as so. We cut to Cromwell playing a game of chess with Edward Seymour, the older brother of Jane. You can hear Anne and Henry having an argument in the background. It was thought that Anne and Henry would have very volatile arguments, but when they make up, they would be perfect friends again. Signs of a toxic relationship, if you ask me. But Cromwell asks Edward how old his sister Jane is, to which he responds,
I don't know, 20 or so?
His response is quite dismissive, as if he's an older brother that doesn't care. However, I find this quite interesting, as we actually don't really know how old Jane Seymour was, as her date of birth was never recorded. We can only assume that she was around 29 when she died, due to the amount of mourners she had at her funeral. So Edward saying 20 or so is a nice little hint to this. Mary Boleyn then comes rushing in, asking for a Bible for her sister Anne, presumably so she and Henry can swear on it that they are married before God, before consummating their marriage or relationship, which we know that they did because in the next scene, Mary confirms their consummation. This is also an example of their strong arguments coupled with a strong makeup. Mary Boleyn tells Cromwell how Henry has sworn to marry Anne legally back in England, and that now Henry just needs to be able to provide a male heir. She then continues to say that if Henry is shy, Anne will know how to help. I've coached her. This is a callback to Mary being Henry's mistress and lover before Anne, and there seems to be a dash of spite and even a little bit of malice to her voice when she says this. Almost as though she's jealous, but also that's so weird taking it out of historical context. You should not be able to give your own sister tips on how to pleasure a man that you used to sleep with. Blech, grim. Anyway, Mary and Cromwell kiss, and then Cromwell draws a knife on a man who interrupts them. Mary says, You almost murdered William Stafford.
You almost murdered William Stafford.
William Stafford was a soldier in the garrison of Calais and gentleman usher of King Henry VIII, hence why he's a Calais, which, don't forget, is under English control, not French at this point in time. William Stafford was also Mary Boleyn's second husband, although they would not marry until 2 years later in 1534, as it's this marriage and pregnancy that causes Mary to be banished from her sister's court, something that unfortunately just gets glossed over in this series. I know they can't cover everything, but Mary just disappears. We then get another time skip, but this time the show tells us we are in 1533. This is the small and private wedding of Henry and Anne Boleyn. As they are leaving the church, Mary makes the same hand gesture as earlier in the episode, indicating that Anne is indeed pregnant. As Mary said, she knows her sister's measurements by the inch. Cromwell goes to visit Thomas More, who is with his daughter Margaret, also known as Meg, who is played by Emma Hiddleston, the sister of Marvel actor Tom Hiddleston, who is also known to have done period dramas, as well as his most infamous period roles, which are War Horse and The Hollow Crown, where Hiddleston plays King Henry V. Cromwell then tells More that Elizabeth Barton has been to see Lady Exeter at her invitation. The Marchioness of Exeter was Gertrude Courtenay, who was also a close friend to Katherine of Aragon. Despite her allegiance obviously being with Katherine, and let's be honest, at this point you were either Team Anne or Team Katherine, Gertrude was appointed as godmother to the young Princess Elizabeth. Eric Ives has speculated that this was a calculated and malicious move on Anne's behalf, and that Gertrude only agreed as she did not want to displease the king. Cromwell then asks More if he is a believer of Barton's prophecies, to which he responds that he is not, showcasing that although Barton had a large Catholic following, that not all Catholics supported her. More then says he advised Barton to stay at home and pray, advice Cromwell gave to More earlier in the episode. We then cut to Anne's coronation, so we know it's the 1st of June 1533, and Anne Boleyn is heavily pregnant. I'm a little sad we don't see someone holding or looking after a potty, as it was thought that Anne needed the toilet a lot during her coronation due to her pregnancy. Although we can see that Anne has a baby bump. In this scene, we see Anne wearing white, a far cry from the crimson velvet gown edged with ermine that she actually wore. We can also see that her sister Mary is taking a chief role in the ceremony, being one of only 2 women to lie Anne on the floor. Henry is watching from behind a screen, and we can see a Tudor rose has been embroidered onto what I think is a flag. I can't really see what it is. In this scene, a rod of ivory is being placed in Anne's left hand and one of gold in her right, followed by St. Edward's crown. Several things with this. 1, this did actually happen, as Anne was effectively being crowned as a queen regnant rather than a queen consort, as she needed the extra emphasis to reaffirm her position as queen. No queen consort before or after has ever been crowned in this way. 2, Anne was the last of Henry's wives to have a coronation and is actually the last queen consort to have a separate coronation to the monarch, even to this day, as Charles and Camilla had their coronation together. 3, Anne was crowned with the St. Edward's crown. The St. Edward's crown that we are used to today is purple. However, this is a replacement that was made for Charles II in 1661, as the medieval crown that Anne would have received was melted down in 1649, thanks to Oliver Cromwell. The Royal Collection Trust even states that the current crown is not an exact replica of the medieval crown, hence why Anne's is red and not purple. Plus, if my memory serves right, if you go to the Chapel Royal at Hampton Court Palace, they do have an image or a sketch of what the original crown looks like, and I'm pretty sure in that it's red as well. We then have this scene filled with awkward tension between Anne and Jane Boleyn, where the two women are at loggerheads, with Jane even talking negatively about Anne in front of her.
All this talk of people loving Catherine, I think they just pity her.
Oh no, they love her because she's the daughter of two anointed sovereigns. They'll never love you like that, madam. Any more than Cromwell here.
Which again really lays into the narrative of Jane being bristly and not wanting to be a part of the Boleyn faction, which again I just don't think is entirely true. So again, go check out Dr. Kat's video on Jane Boleyn, highly recommend, very fascinating. Anne then mentions that Barton has prophesied that the so-called Princess Mary will be Queen, which we know will be true as Mary will become Queen Mary I, but I also love how Anne calls Mary the so-called princess, as Mary at this point was illegitimate and should have been referred to as the Lady Mary. But even Anne, who resents Mary just as much as she resents her mother Katherine, still calls her princess, even if it is with disdain. Anne also mentions those who are plotting against her, name-dropping Catherine of Aragon, her predecessor. Exeter, here I'm assuming that she's referring to Gertrude's husband, Henry Courtenay. The Poles, which quite frankly could refer to a lot, but I'm just going to name mainly Reginald, as he was the most outspoken of the Pole family, as he was safe under the Pope's protection, and the Plantagenets, who were the ruling royal family before the Tudors, and therefore most of them have a claim to the throne, many of whom are still around during King Henry VIII's reign and are by extension his maternal family. His mother, Queen Elizabeth of York, was a Plantagenet princess, and her father was the Plantagenet king, Edward IV. The Pole family was closely related to King Henry VIII through the Plantagenet line. They were descendants of George, Duke of Clarence, brother of King Edward IV and King Richard III. The Courtenay family was also related to King Henry VIII, though more distantly. They were descended from Edward IV through his daughter Katherine of York, the younger sister of Henry's mother, Elizabeth of York. Henry Courtenay, Marquess of Exeter, was Henry VIII's cousin once removed. Cromwell and Jane Seymour then have a chat in the corridor, where they talk about Anne, and Jane represents the brash, jealous and often rude side of Anne, saying that, well, it's good to be humble, and she makes sure we are. Whereas Cromwell, who has dealt with Anne and somewhat built up a friendship, if we can call it that, is positive that Anne may soften now that she is queen and has a baby on the way. Jane then shows Cromwell her humble face, showing that she can act, and that the meek and mild persona might be just that.
This is my humble face. Will it serve?
Something that historians are leaning more into. The fact that Jane was just as ambitious, but she just played the game better than Anne. I mean, the woman became engaged to Henry a day after Anne's execution and was wed 10 days later. We return to Cromwell looking at the Sheba tapestry, except this time it has been gifted to him from King Henry VIII, which is also to serve as a constant reminder of his and Henry's roles in that tapestry. Henry can give Cromwell everything, but he can also take it. Interestingly, we get a line where the courtier is asking, are we announcing the birth of a prince or just the birth of a child? Which I think totally underlines how this baby and Elizabeth was viewed. We know that celebrations that were planned were cancelled when Elizabeth was born, as they were deemed too good for the birth of a girl, which is quite sad really. And that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Just a reminder that I have published a children's book about the 6 wives of King Henry VIII. I have spent a lot of time with my illustrator trying to get all the drawings as perfect as possible, down to the outfits that they would have worn, what they would have looked like. It is available on Amazon and would make a perfect Christmas present for a child between the ages of 3 to 7. so I would really appreciate your support. If you do purchase a copy, many thanks in advance. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, have a wonderful day. Bye!